Do just a quick little yin practice right now. We're going to start with a little neck release, shoulder stretch. So in an easy seated position, you can come with your ankles crossed, or if you want to take the heels lined up, Siddhasana or Sukhasana, I'm going to cross my ankles. And just sit comfortably. I'm going to take my left hand, just rest it on my left knee. Right hand's going to come around, grab that left biceps area. And then I'm just going to take my left hand and climb it forward so it pulls my right shoulder back. And I'm going to pull my left ear down to my left shoulder and just sit here for just a couple moments. Root back down into the both sit bones, so the front of the sit bones rather than the back, so you're not rounding. And breathe from your belly up. Okay, and then release. And take your right hand over to your right knee. The left arm can come around, catch the biceps. You might have to pull your right hand back. And then once you catch your right arm with your left hand, slide your right hand forward so it pulls your left shoulder back, but not your torso. So we're not twisting. You're keeping your shoulders right over your hips. And then right ear to the right shoulder. Relax your left shoulder so it's not pulling up or pulling back. And then again, settle in on those sitting bones. So you're about, more to the front of the sit bones rather than the back of the sit bones. So centered off your tailbone even, lift your chest. All right, and then slowly release that. And then we're going to come into a toe tuck squat. So I'm going to come over to hands and knees, tuck my toes under all of my toes, so even the pinky toe, if you need to take your hands back and get the pinky toe to come out from under. And then sitting back on your heels, rest your hands down on your thighs. Stack your shoulders over your hips, ears over your shoulders. You can close your eyelids down and just breathe in a few rounds of breath here. And keep your heels squeezing in toward each other so your feet aren't sickling out. But when you squeeze your heels in toward each other, they don't have to touch. Don't let your right or left pinky toes come up off the floor. Okay, and then come back over to hands and knees. And then you're going to flip your toes back so you're out of that dorsiflexion into a plantar flexion. Knees apart, big toes together. Press down to the tops of your ankles on the floor. And then walk your hands forward, Balasana. And let the center of your forehead rest on the floor. Pull your hips down towards your heels. So use your hands to help push your hips back. So there's a rounding in your spine. Breathe here in and out of your nose. Keep your belly engaged, keep your core pressing your back to the rounding stretch. Here, keep your shoulders soft and open, even as your arms are strong and pushing your floor away, pushing your mat away. Keep those shoulders spacious and soft. And really here, feel the breath moving from your belly into your mid-rib cage on the back side of your body. Okay, inhale, come back up. And then we'll take this into frog. So I'm going to get a blanket for my knees. So a downward facing frog, Mandukasana. Just going to have this run along the length of my mat. So the first position, the first frog we're taking is elbows on the floor, and then the second will be chest on the floor. So I'm going to situate my knees apart. You can keep your big toes or your heels in closer together here, and then eventually you can start to take your feet out away from each other with your toes and your heels in the straight line, and then the insides of your feet on the floor, and your hips are not coming forward. They're not pushing back towards your heels, but they are slightly pushing back towards your heels. You just don't want to sit back like you would in child's pose. I'm going to take elbows to the floor here and then keep the press back slightly so that my hip creases line up with my knee creases. And then here, drop your sit bones, drop your tailbone, not tucking, just dropping. And you're pulling your belly button up, pulling your front ribs in. Push down with your elbows from the back of your shoulders. And then I'm going to go down to my chest here, using my forearms to pillow my forehead, and chest towards the floor. Keep the hips from moving forward, so don't let your hips move forward when you take your chest down. Okay, and then start to come back up to your elbows, to your forearms, and then your hands. Press yourself forward just to take the weight off of your hips, and you can pull your feet back in and then pull your knees back in. And then we'll move this into Garland Malasana. So I'm going to move my blanket to the side. You can also use the blanket here for the backs of your heels. That might be helpful. I'm actually going to take it just as it was. And in this garland pose, you can have your feet a little farther apart than we normally do, but not turning the toes out. So toes do not turn out, toes point straight forward. And then squat down towards the floor, drop with your heels towards, or drop with your butt towards your heels and towards the ground, towards the floor. And then if you feel like it's really hard for you to keep those toes pointing in, you may just have to kind of turn them in a little bit more and then let them on the skin of your foot just kind of stretch open, okay? And then you can lean down inside your thighs. If you've got blocks, you can stack them up under your forehead. And feel that softness in your back. Feel the release, the rounding in your low back. And keep pushing down into the big toe mound of your foot and the heel of your foot. And then there's almost like a squeeze in your ankle, like you're trying to take your knees forward more. And then eventually, you can get maybe a little lower. You don't even have to have anything under your head. You just let your head relax down. Sometimes being here for a few moments that's what it takes to get those hips to relax. And you might feel after just a few more breaths here, there's a relaxing in your hips and a dropping down, and then you can actually feel the stretch in your back. All right, and then we're going to take this into forward fold. I'm going to keep my feet apart just as they are, lift my hips, and then hang down here. You can grab opposite elbows and just sway a little side to side. But let the weight come forward into the front ends of your foot and the balls of your feet. Your heels don't lift, but you've got the weight in the balls of your feet so that your head is moving forward and your hips are not moving back. And your head's moving down towards the floor. You can even let your arms relax, slip your palms up if you'd like. I like my hands in, so my elbows move out, and then my shoulders can actually relax. And then notice if you get comfortable here and really relaxed here, I felt it. I felt the sway back in my hips, or like this drifting back. And so I had to kind of realign and push forward to get into the balls of my feet. All right, I'm going to come up halfway, and then I'm going to situate my left leg back at the end of the mat, and I'm going to take my right foot off to the right edge of my mat so my hands are inside my right foot, moving into a lizard stretch. I'm going to take my left knee down. You can use the blanket if it's still there from the last end. You can have your left knee on the blanket. I'm going to flip my left toes back. I'm going to keep my right knee straight over my right toes, especially the second right toe. And I'm going to walk my hands off to the left and take a leaning side stretch here and lizard lunge. And keep pressing my right knee. So it's not necessarily moving off to the right, but it's not coming into the left. It's staying straight. So there's a little bit of a right side push, like an outer push, but you don't want to lift up to the outside edge of your right foot. Keep the ball of your right foot pressed down and the inner right heel pressed down and that inner right knee going straight forward. Okay, and then come back into center. And then we're going to step back up with left foot and back with right foot. Lower the right knee down. The left knee is on the outside of your left arm. Left hand's inside. And right away, push into the big toe mound and the inner heel of your left foot. So there's not this tendency to roll out to the outside edge. And keep the toes pointing straight forward. The knees pointing straight forward. Flip the right foot back, lengthen your right thigh as long back as you need. So we're not kneeling on the right knee here. The right leg is back and it's stretched out back towards the back of the mat. And my right hand's off to the right, left hand stretching slightly farther than the right hand. And then don't let that left knee follow your left shoulder. Push back away from your left shoulder, pressing into the ball of your left foot and heel of your left foot. And keep your chest from collapsing down under the shoulders. So it actually presses through the shoulders, or it doesn't collapse behind the shoulders. It presses in front of your shoulder heads. All right, and then come back forward with your hands. And then step back up with your right foot. Exhale, fold.
And left leg's gonna go back. And then this time your right leg is more in the center of your hand or more inside of your right hand. It's not lizard, so it's gonna be a lunge. And then we're gonna stretch this into a half split. Right leg starts to straighten out. And then you can take your arms over beyond the end of your mat, forward beyond the end of your mat. Push into the ball of your right foot. If you want a block here to press into, sometimes that helps to keep your right foot from collapsing. This actually fires up the back of my right leg more. Keep your chest, again, from falling behind your shoulders, and it comes in front of your shoulders. And keep the right knee from collapsing down, so there's a slight lift in the right kneecap so that it's not collapsing in and down, so it doesn't turn in and down towards the floor. The kneecap is lifting up and going in the direction of your second right toe. Pull that right hip back as you pull the right knee up slightly. Okay, and then you're going to take your right foot back to the floor and then back even a little bit farther so that you can bend really far over your right toes with your right knee. So this is getting into that right ankle, the back of the right ankle and the calf muscles. And your left leg is still stretching long behind you. This is Ekapada Sirsasana 2 prep. So really stretch the front of your left hip out here. If this is too much on the front of your left hip, you could use blocks on either side of your foot for your hands. And let that right knee, so the right knee isn't collapsing in, you're kind of screwing the right heel into the ground. The right knee is going straight in the direction of your right second toe, but it is over your ankle. It's beyond the ankle. It's over your toes. Lift your chest, lift your ribs, soften your right hip down, and push into your right heel. Okay, and then come up out of this. Step back up to the top of your mat with your left leg and fold here. All right, and then your right leg's going to come back for the half split. Lower your right thigh towards the floor or right knee down towards the floor, and then stretch out your left leg. Again, if you want the block underneath the ball of your foot. When you do that, try not to push your left knee down. Lift your left knee up. And then your hands can come to 2 extra blocks if you've got them, or the floor. Stretch your chest forward. And then pull that left hip back as you lift that left kneecap up. If you've got the block under your foot, try not to let just the pinky toe side press in. Push into the ball of the foot as well. So the inner big toe mound is pressing down. Okay, and then take this to the left foot, pull that left heel way in. So the right leg is stretching back really far. We're not leaning on the right knee anymore or kneeling on the right knee as we just were in that half split. The left knee is way over that left big toe. Second toe, you should actually look down and see your big toe still so the knee is not turning in. It's not going out either, so you only see the big toe. And then again, if you need the blocks under your hands, press that right leg back a little longer.
Lift your chest, feel that stretch in the front of your right hip and the back of your left ankle. Squeeze the calf and the hamstrings together to push your left knee forward. You should be feeling some work in the front of your left shin here. This is really good prep for Malasana Garland pose, as well as Ekapada Rajakapotasana 2. One leg king pigeon, second variation, where you would reach back and catch that right foot. We're not doing that. Just stretching. All right, I'm going to take my hands up to the top of the mat and then push off that right foot to step forward. Uttanasana, slowly step out of that and you feel that coming out of it. I'm going to forward fold for just a moment. Okay, and then come back down to kneeling. Right knee is going to come forward. Lift your left knee so you can swing the right heel over. And then scoot your left hip back to the right heel. Hands can come down, elbows can come down, forehead can come down. Ekapada Rajakapotasana 1. Prop up the hip if you need with a block or a blanket. So this is nice to have the blanket here so you can just kind of pull it forward. And if you need to fold it over to support the right hip. But hip to heel and right knee lines up with right hip so it's not way out to the side. And then rest on your forehead. And let your hips relax down to the floor so your belly can soften, but still slightly engage. So your belly's soft enough to breathe, but there's a slight pullback of your belly button to release your low back. So there's not a massive back bend here, and that'll set that right hip down to the floor more so you can feel a bigger stretch in the right hip. Okay, inhale, come back up. And then I'm going to swing my left leg around and then take my right leg over my left leg, half Gomukhasana, and then forward fold here. And you can use a block here if you'd like for your forehead. Or you might want one for your foot even and your knee. This actually is pretty cool. I like this. Trying to get that right knee over your left knee eventually. So it's kind of sneaking over there slowly but surely. The left heel up to the outer right hip. If you're feeling like the back of your right knee is collapsing or getting pushed to the floor, pat it up with a blanket so that it's not hyperextending. And so I've got the right side, the block, just kind of jammed under my right thigh rather than the right knee. So the block is just kind of coming right in under the right hip, like a little door jamb. And that's going to keep my hip from pulling back. So my right hip is pushing forward. Okay, inhale, come up, and move your props out of the way so we can go back into pigeon on the second side. I'm going to sweep my legs around, come back over into hands and knees. And then I'm going to take my left knee forward and then lift that right knee so the left heel can swing over. And I'm just going to squeak that right hip back behind the left heel. Again, if you need the blanket here to pad up your hip or your foot or anything that feels good, maybe cover it up if your foot's getting cold. So the left knee and left hip are in line. The left knee is not way over here. And the right hip and the left heel in line, forehead down. And take a few moments just to relax here with your forehead resting. And then after a few moments, you can check in with your belly and see if you're dipping down with your back. Instead, pull your tailbone down and pull your belly button up, just only enough that it doesn't impede your breath, so it doesn't keep your breath from moving. And you're not also pushing with your shoulders, right? So let your shoulders relax. It's just a belly squeeze. When you do feel your left sit bone drop back to the floor, make sure it's not pulling your right hip over away from your left heel. So you're still squeezing your left heel with your right hip and the floor with your left hip. All right, then I'm going to inhale, come up, and swing that right leg around. I'm going to take my left leg over my right knee and put the block under my left heel this time. And try to get that right and left knee in line. And then again, here's this block. It's just kind of jammed in here like a little door jamb. I'm going to put this blanket under the back of my knee because I don't want it to, there we go. So again, just kind of working the heel over towards the right hip, slowly but surely. Lean out over your right foot or over your left knee, and then try not to let your right foot turn out. So keep the right toes pointing up to the ceiling and pressing forward with the ball of your foot. See if you can relax the right hip a little bit, just a little bit, so it softens back and drops back.
And see if you can drop down to both sit bones a little bit more and let that back release a little bit more just for the next few rounds of breath here. Okay, and then inhale, come back up and take your left leg off. Right. And move the blankets out of the way. And we're going to come to the belly for Sphinx pose. If you need a blanket under your hips, you can pad up your hips. I'm going to roll around over to hands and knees. And then lower down, hips and belly. And come to my elbows. And so for the first one, we'll have elbows on the floor, chest pulling through. Engage your thighs. Pull your mat back with your arms. So your thighs are squeezing your kneecaps up, but your pinky toes are on the floor. So the tops of your pinky toes, the toenails, are on the floor. Your feet can be as far apart as you need. You want them a little farther, take them a little farther. A little closer, take them a little closer. Whatever alleviates the back. So you're pulling your chest through to pull up out of your low back. You should feel a lot of arm work. Also, the shoulders are not moving forward or up. They're not pulling down either. You're pulling your chest through your shoulders instead. And then go ahead and straighten your arms if you want to add on. But lift your elbow creases forward, not locking, so we're not lifting the shoulders. You're pressing your elbow creases and then push down into the index mound and the thumb mound of your hand. And then imagine you can squeeze a block between your elbows and press the block forward. And keep those thighs engaged, keep your kneecaps lifted. I release down. Drop your chin, lift your belly, and then press up, hands and knees. And then we'll situate for Virasana. Supta Virasana. I'm going to use a couple blocks. You can use a bolster if you'd like. I'm going to use a blanket under my shins. So I got the blanket. Okay. And I'm going to take the 2 blocks behind. Heart and head. Again, you can use a bolster behind if you'd like instead. Knees are together, heels are apart. If you need an extra blanket under your ankles, you could take an extra blanket, roll it up, and put it where your feet are going to be. Okay. So you got your ankles, and you can even sit on that extra blanket roll. Gives you an extra little lift. And then you can start to come back simply to your hands here for just a few moments. You could have elbows on the floor, so if your hands are on the floor, your shoulders are not moving forward. Your chest is lifting up, and you can stay here. You could even put a block under your hips if you need an extra little lift in the hips to get out of that knee. If it's pulling the knees too much by dropping your hips, it causes a bigger internal rotation of the thighs, so that may pull in the inner knee, and that might hurt, so be careful with that. Also, I think I'm just going to get rid of this blanket roll because I don't like what it's doing for me. Make wise decisions for you. I'm going to come back to the block now at my upper back. Hey, look at that. I think that's the first time it's ever lined up right away. And just rest here for a few moments. If you want that extra blanket under your hips here, that might come in handy. But lift your hip bones up just a little bit so they're not falling down. So your sit bones are
kind of stretching towards your knees. So the backs of your sit bones move towards the back of your knees. So you're not popping your butt down and pushing into your low back, right? And breathe into the block behind your back or bolster. And then take your hands to the floor, your elbows to the floor, so you can push your head up off the bolster or block. Come back up to an upright position, right over the knees into tabletop pose, and just ease out of the ankles. So maybe tuck your toes under, and then you're going to ease out of the knees. And so it may just be a push back with a straight leg and heel towards the floor, pedal your heel back. And then the second side, right foot comes back, lift the knee, ease out of that right side knee for a moment, and the ankle too. And then we're going to come into a seated position and take Upavishta Konasana. I'm going to use 2 blankets here. I'm going to roll up each blanket for a little bumper for the back of my knee. You can turn on your mat so your heels are on the mat if you don't have soft flooring at home, or if you have an extra 2 blankets, you can put them under your heels if it bothers you. Right? And then if you want those blocks from behind or your bolster, take it out in front of you and lean out over your bolster or blocks. Exhale, fold. And press out through the balls of your foot so your feet aren't collapsing in. So just keep your legs, your toes active and lifting them up to the ceiling. Let the backs of your knees rest on the blanket rolls. Elbows can be on the floor, or if you've got the bolster, you can reach up and hug the end of your bolster. But wherever you are, you're not letting your shoulders come up to your ears and clenching your jaw. Okay, so you've got space between your ears and your shoulders. Back of your neck is long. And drop those sit bones down. Let the low back relax here. Engage your belly soft around your breath. So it's not an extreme tight engagement. It's just a subtle engagement, the contraction on your exhale.
And then inhale, press down with your hands to lift your head back up over your hips. You can use your hands to pull your feet in. Take your soles of the soles of your feet on the floor as your knees bend. Kind of crawl towards your heels with your butt and squeeze in with your arms. Squeeze your chest up and through. Open your heart. And then we're going to twist here, an easy noose pose. Hug with your left arm. Your right hand comes behind and twist over your right side. Keep pressing your right hip forward though and opening your right shoulder backward. All right, and then release that twist. Hug. You can even hug down, so you can roll back and hug or lift up and hug. And then go to your left. So you're gonna hug with your right arm now, hook your arm, and then hook your knees. You can hook your fingers behind the left calf. The left hand comes back. So as your left hip moves forward, your left shoulder moves backward. And release that twist. And then take a moment to situate yourself into a comfortable relaxation. So your blanket roll could go on the backs of your thighs, and then the other blanket roll you could use at the upper back. Little waterfall here if that feels good. If you don't want to use any of the props, don't use them. Just take a moment to open up your heart though to the ceiling. So even if you're just lying flat on your back, feel your chest lift up to the ceiling, let your face soften and your jaw relax. And then take as long as you'd like to rest here. All right, thanks, yogis.